Good morning and welcome to Bible Truth for Kids. Today is part 2 of our story in the book of Esther. You know, last time we saw a banquet and a beauty contest and a hanging, and today we are going to see a plot to destroy an entire nation and also a call to courage. Do you remember in our first part that Mordecai had said to Esther, "Don't tell anyone that you're a Jew"? Like, why did he say that? Well, remember that the Jews had been living over here in Israel and they had been exiled out of their country into Persia. And the Persian Empire was huge. Everything in green belongs to the Persian Empire. Now, do you think those Persians were excited when they knew that thousands and thousands of Jews were going to be moving into their neighborhood? I don't think so. You know, I want you to look at this picture. Does everybody in this picture look exactly like you do? They don't, do they? You know, when somebody moves into our neighborhood, especially somebody from a different country, they find it hard to fit in because they're different. You know, they wear different clothes, they might talk different, have different customs, just do things differently. And because of that, some people don't like them just because they're different. They don't respect them. You know, that is called prejudice. Prejudice is never a good thing, but it's always been around. And it was around in Persia as well. You know, even King Xerxes didn't know that Esther was a Jew. Can you imagine how some of those prejudiced Persians would have felt if they knew that their queen was a Jew? All right, we want to look one more time at King Xerxes' palace because it's so huge. Now, this was the garden court, the open garden court where Xerxes had that famous 7-day feast that we talked about last time. And Esther was brought into here, into the women's quarters when she came in for the beauty contest. And King Xerxes' throne room is way back here, you know, quite set back far in his palace. And out here is what we call the King's Gate. Now, the King's Gate is more than just a gate. This is a place where Mordecai heard about the plot to kill King Xerxes. But you can see that these are people here, and so the King's Gate is actually a very large building. And a lot of the king's business, the kingdom's business, was conducted there at the King's Gate. Now, King Xerxes had such a huge empire. I mean, it was 127 provinces. So it was hard for him to run it just by himself. And so he promoted a man called Haman to be his prime minister. You know, there was nobody greater in the kingdom than King Xerxes himself. And he set out a command that everybody should bow down to Haman and they should pay him honor and respect. And even when Haman went into the city of Susa, the people, they respected him and honored him and bowed down before him. Everyone, that is, except for Mordecai. He would not bow down before Haman. He would not pay him honor and respect. Well, why not? Well, remember that Mordecai was a Jew. And who are the Jews to bow down to? God and God alone. Mordecai would not bow down to a man. But every day, the servants at the King's Gate, because Mordecai was there quite often, they urged him, "You've got to bow down to Haman. You have got to show him honor and respect. The king commands it." But Mordecai would not. And that filled Haman with fury. And he tried to think of a way that he could harm Mordecai because he wouldn't bow down to him. You know, Haman was just full of his own importance. He loved power. He loved to be worshipped. He just couldn't stand it that Mordecai refused to give it to him. Well, you know, one day the servant said to Haman, "Did you know that Mordecai is a Jew?" Oh, he's a Jew. And then Haman came up with a plan. He thought, "I know what I'll do. I will destroy all of the people of Mordecai. I'll destroy all of the Jews. I will annihilate them." Now, annihilate means to utterly destroy, to wipe out completely. This was Haman's plan. He wanted to wipe out the Jews completely. Every man, every woman, every child, every baby would be killed and destroyed. That was the only thing that would make Haman happy. But you know, he couldn't do this on his own authority. He needed the approval and authority of King Xerxes. So first, before he went to see King Xerxes, he wanted to do what was called casting pur. So casting pur was a way to get a decision about something. We might say like throwing dice to get a lucky number. Haman wanted to cast pur and come up with a date, a special day that he could destroy all the Jews. He wanted to cast pur, so you know he had his men cast pur over and over again until they came up with the 13th day of Adar. That was the lucky day of the month that they were going to do this. So everything was coming together for Haman. He had the date and he knew what he was going to do. So he went to King Xerxes and he sat down with him and he said, listen, you've got people scattered throughout all of your empire. People that, they don't obey your laws. They have their own laws. What good are these people to you when they won't follow your laws? They should just be destroyed. You should just wipe them out. And Haman said, if we do that, then I personally will put 10,000 talents of silver into the king's treasury. Now that is a lot of money. By today's standards, that would be like $250,000. Haman was very wealthy. He said, I'll put that money in there if we go ahead with this plan. Well, King Xerxes, he didn't really even know who the Jews were. I mean, he had so many people in his empire, and he was glad to have Haman looking out for him. And he thought, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. And so, he gave Haman his signet ring. And he said to him, you draw up the edict, and I'll sign it, and we'll send it out. Oh, it was just coming together perfectly. So Haman wrote out the edict, which said to kill and destroy and to get rid of every Jew throughout the empire. And then what they did was the edict would look like this. It would be written out, rolled up, then they pour hot wax on it, and then the king puts his ring, presses his ring into that wax. It's his seal. It's the seal of the king, and everybody knows that whatever is in that edict, it can't be reversed, it can't be canceled. This is the command of the king. And so Haman had all of this drawn up, and then he ordered all of the horsemen who were called couriers. They were to take all of the edicts throughout the whole empire and deliver it. And that's what they did. They were told to hurry. Well, when all of these edicts reached the provinces, they opened them and they read that the Jews were to be destroyed. Oh, there was great mourning and weeping and lamenting and wailing. I mean, what was going on? Why should we, the Jews, be destroyed? What is happening? Why is the king doing this? Why did he order this? Nobody understood. And they were terrified. Well, when Mordecai read that edict, he tore his clothes. He tore his clothes and he put on sackcloth and ashes, which is like this. It's like burlap. So what you would do is you would take your own clothes off, put on burlap, and then you would take these ashes, you put them on your head and all over yourself. And then you would wail and mourn, and people knew that you were deeply distressed. Well, Esther got word of what Mordecai was doing. She didn't know why he was doing this. He was going throughout the city of Susa with all this sackcloth and ashes on and wailing. So she sent out a servant with a lot of clothes and garments so that Mordecai could get rid of this sackcloth and put on proper clothes. Mordecai refused to. And so Esther sent out another servant and she said, you need to go and find out why exactly is Mordecai doing this. Well, when the servant asked Mordecai, he told the servant exactly what was happening. In fact, he sent a copy of the edict back with the servant to Esther. And he commanded Esther, you need to go into King Xerxes and plead on behalf of the Jews because he has set a date for them to be destroyed. Well, Esther sent back a message to Mordecai and said, you know that it's against the law to go in and see the king unless you're invited. And, if you do that and you're not invited, you're put to death. And the king has not asked me, he's not invited me for 30 days. I mean, she's supposed to risk her life to go into the king. I mean, I don't know. She just said, no, I can't. Well, Mordecai, when he got that message, he sent another one back and he said, Esther, don't think that because you're in the palace, you're going to escape. You and all your living relatives will be put to death with all the other Jews on the day that the king has set aside. Well, it's a call to courage. What is she going to do? Will she do it? If you tried to see the king without an invitation, unless he held out his golden scepter to you when he saw you, you'd be put to death. It was a great risk. But she decided she would do it. So she sent a message back to Mordecai and said, you gather all of the Jews that are in the city of Susa, bring them all together, and hold a fast for me for 3 days. Now, a fast means not eating or drinking anything. And usually, when you fast like that, during the time that you would eat, normally, that's when you would pray. And so Esther said, myself and all my servant girls, we will fast as well. And after the 3 days, I will go in to see the king. And if I perish, I perish. She was willing to risk whether or not King Xerxes would hold out to her a golden scepter because she's not been invited. Well, is this God's plan? Is this how God is going to deliver his people from Haman's wicked plot? Well, we'll find out next time what happens to Esther when she goes into the king. And while she's doing this, something else happens between Haman and Mordecai. And Haman decides that Mordecai needs to be hung on a gallows. So we'll see you next time.